Hello folks! It's been almost a year of slowly working on Marco's KF2 Sentry mod. Last year I got into Killing Floor 2 modding. I'd never modded before, so it was a very steep learning curve. After messing with a weapon mod I never finished, I immediately bit off more than I could chew with Marco's Turret mod. It was fully functional when I started, but I had identified multiple bugs that annoyed me and seemed easily solvable. I networked with a couple other creators and obtained a decompiled copy of the mod. After looking it over, I found more things I wished to improve, implement, or even remove. Very quickly, the scope of the project ballooned outwards to include my new vision for the mod's potential, as well as the visions of the creators I had networked with. We set out to rewrite the mod into an expandable set of turrets that ran faster, used less networking resources, had more turret upgrades, was fully customizable by the user, ran in all networking modes, and had a custom GUI. To date, these are only some of the changes I've worked to include in the new version of the mod. I think the community using Marco's mod for so long is a testament to how much they would enjoy an updated version, and I'm proud to say that none of these features have been cut along the way. So right off the bat, I want to point out that one of the cool things about the current version of the mod, and this may have been true for Marco's version as well, is that there's no
Bonjour.
modifier
Come and get your tools of trade.
required for your game mode, for your server, in order for this to work. All you have to do is add the Sentry Hammer, which will someday be called the Engineer's Wrench, add it to the trader. So right now I have the hammer. I don't have a modifier on the game, on the world, but I can still spawn this. I can still go into my nice custom menu. And now that I've gone into the new custom menu, it's generated this overlay object in memory, and you can see the controls for the Sentry Hammer in the upper right hand corner of my screen. Should have been showing up as soon as I bought the hammer, but that's something that will be easily fixed. Talking about bug fixes before I go on to talk about changes, there was a pretty bad bug with Marco's version of the mod, which allowed players to take over other players' turrets when they left the game beyond the limit that was set by the server owner. As far as improvements, you've already seen a number having to do with the graphical user interface. The controls in the upper right hand corner of the screen are much nicer looking in my opinion, with a dark overlay behind them highlighting the text. What you're seeing is the TF2 official font, and a lot of small changes making the text easier to read, more condensed. In the main menu here, which you'll notice when you move up to a turret, you get a little press E to upgrade turret.
A molten bucket.
So we open the GUI, and right now I'm running this in 16 by 9, but I'm actually using a ultra widescreen monitor. Ratios greater than 16 by 9, it will actually just cut out the center 16 by 9 of the screen and display this menu correctly. When you're placing a turret, it places it on the ground or wherever it thinks that it would be placed. And you're able to turn the turret by looking up and down very smoothly. Right now the weapon is set up to be able to parry and block. You hold right click to put out your preview of the turret, and then you left click to put that turret down. I'm planning on changing the preview of the turret to just be a green semi-transparent texture when it is able to be placed, and a red transparent texture when it's not able to be placed. When we go into the menu here, we can see that I can afford all of these, but I can't afford the turret level 2. So it has red text. I can't afford either of these down here either. If I left click on one of these upgrades, I get a little pop-up. Wow, that's a bug right there. I plan on having it give more information than just a duplicate of the description. And you can hit confirm to purchase the upgrade. And as soon as you purchase the upgrade, I just left the menu so that you can see the good old animation going. But you don't have to leave the menu, and these upgrades will be purchased. So you can see that everything in the menu changes to reflect the purchase of the upgrade. I just bought the third upgrade, so that unlocks rocket ammo, missile ammo, for our turret. And you can see that now instead of just saying 200 out of 1,000, it says 200 out of 2,000, because there's a higher ammo capacity on the level 3 turrets. And it now says dash 0 out of 50, whereas before it just didn't say anything there. So just very slight improvements which make everything more readable, nicer. One of the single biggest improvements that we wanted in the original mod was the ability to
Lovely.
fill the ammo
Should
for
have
both
brought them
rockets
up
and
in
bullets
bucket.
without having to spam click the same button over and over again. And so now you can buy a limited amount if you want to buy just a little, kind of like buying a magazine for your guns, or you can just hit the fill button and it will charge you whatever it's showing underneath, 3,600. That's actually calculated on the fly based on how much ammo is missing. Under turret info here, I plan on having a second column on the right, which shows the rate of fire, the damage, the range, all of the stats of the turret currently, so that when you buy an upgrade like Eagle Eye, which increases the range by a percentage, or a set amount, it's actually whatever we as the designers of the upgrades would like. I'd like it so that
I'll
when you
never
buy
get used
Eagle
to the
Eye
sound of
or
that.
one of these other upgrades like Fire Rate, I'd like to have those values right here so that you can see them change and compare them from one turret to another. Right now, this is just a whole bunch of upgrades we've thrown in here, but these can get relatively complex because some upgrades can be requirements of other upgrades. So you have to buy one or multiple upgrades before you have the opportunity to buy this other one. Or the upgrades can also be made mutually exclusive, where if you buy this one upgrade, these other upgrades will not be available to you. It means that there's effectively upgrade trees available that can be programmed into this setup.
Lovely. Should have brought them up in bucket.
If we go over to the settings menu, you can see that we have client settings and server settings. This client settings, if I close here, you can see in the upper right we have the controls for the weapon. If I go into settings and I uncheck show controls overlay, it will no longer be shown. Similarly, I want to have these server settings be able to be changed from in the game, but only if the person has admin privileges. Being able to enable and disable different turret types, being able to enable and disable different upgrades for the different turret types. You'll be able to change all of those things
Lovely.
right here
Should
in the
have brought them
settings
up
menu.
in bucket.
I plan on having all of that information visible if you don't have admin privileges, just not changeable, so that if you're a client, you can join a game with this mod running, come into the settings here, have control over your client settings, and also be able to see what settings the server is currently set up with. A player could sign in, see what the settings are, and then sign in as admin from there, and make changes which are A, saved so that next time the servers run, they are run with those settings for the mod, and B, are immediately implemented to see how balanced it is and tweak it from there, which should make it infinitely faster and more precise to tune to work with other complementary mods. Alrighty, I don't want to get too far into the code, I don't want to spend too much time on it because there's so much of it, but there are a few things to point out, and one of them is simply how much the code base has grown. It's gone from 13 files. These are the original decompiled files that I was sent from Commander Slav. Shout out to him. And it's grown into all of this, all through here. It's grown into 60-something files, I believe. And most of that is because of the graphical user interface. All of these files that begin with KF GUI, these are all components which are built up together to create the menus. This was all originally written by Marco, as far as I'm aware, as part of the server extensions mod. Oh, and then they were maintained by Forest Mark X, updated and expanded, and bug fixed. And so shoutouts to Forest Mark X for providing his fixed versions of these GUI files that he had most recently used in his Killing Floor 2 Classic Mode mod. So I took these components and then reworked how they're presented, how they look graphically to match the TF2 Team Fortress 2 aesthetic. But it's Marco's code updated by Forest Mark X over the years under the hood that's allowing these menus to happen. So we have all those in there. And then it is a larger number of files, all the way down through here, probably 20 files. tell the mod how to function, how the turrets themselves should shoot and behave, and the networking side of things. And then down here we have more files that have to do with the user interface, marked UI, UIP, and UIR, which have to do with, like I said before, organizing these components into legible menus. I will open the original decompile of the Sentry Turret and my replacement version. It's tough calling this an update of Marco's mod because many of these classes are just completely rewritten from the ground up. Looking at the decompile on the right, there aren't a lot of comments. And one of the thrusts, one of the main things that I want to accomplish by doing this update or doing this revamp of Marco's mod was making it so that other programmers in the future, other modders, can take this and fix it when it's broken. They can add their own turrets. They can expand it to include features that I didn't think of or didn't want myself. And in order to do that, commenting the code is really important. We have a move away from having these constants declared in his class over on the right that have to do with the upgrades. First off, you'll notice that most of these are sequential, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And so it would be more appropriate to use something like an enum. And so we have this shift from using constants to using enums, which are much more easily expandable as we add more upgrades and more turret types. And along with that, an emphasis on moving to dynamic arrays. And dynamic arrays can be really tricky, especially with replication. So they're not an end-all be-all fix for everything. But by using dynamic arrays as much as possible, we're making it so that we can add new turret types extremely easily. If I go to my settings object, which kind of gathers the server settings in one place and interacts with the config file, and does a lot of replication from the server to the clients to ensure that the clients have the correct settings at all times, and dictates on the server whether or not new turrets are allowed to be made. You know, this is the object which gatekeeps whether or not we've hit the max number of turrets built, things like that. And in here, if we go all the way to the bottom, we can see that the turret type TF2, ST Turret TF2, this is actually just an entry in a dynamic array. And so when we create more turrets, for instance, an acid pool turret or a grenade launching turret, once it has been implemented, all it takes is to add it to this dynamic array for it to be spawnable, selectable. Now, when it comes to replication, that's where dynamic arrays really fall down. And at its heart, the replication from server to clients has been minimized as much as possible. There are some of these things like cannon fire counter, which were replicated constantly from server to client every time a bullet was shot, so that other things could be kicked off on the client, other decision-making processes. And while I recognize the necessary evil of having some replicated values, some replicated variables, which are only replicated to trigger events, essentially, like AI, the AI of the turret deciding to stop targeting something, like there has to be some way for the client to be notified of that. And I don't think this is the best way to do that. And so I made a number of changes to the variables that were replicated from the server to the client, and probably brought that down by 25% or something overall. One of the other things that I did to really allow that to happen was by reworking the AI. Here we go. And you can see the naming convention has been kind of changed for all these files so that it's easier for me to locate them. You can see every single function, like set enemy here, is just slightly different. That's because it's been gone over with a fine-tooth comb multiple times to find out exactly what is required and what is not. But this is actually a great example. Before in set enemy, in the old decompile, it used to check to see if the turret was recently built, so that if the turret was built within the last couple seconds and it was still going through its animation phase, its build animation, it wouldn't be able to target an enemy and start shooting in that phase. And that's something that I also need to make sure of. But the way that I went about doing it is very different, where Marco had a couple states that he kind of flip-flopped between loosely. I have a couple more states in total that, like setup state, which is auto, which allows us to use state control to achieve the same thing. When the turret is building, it's not in a state where it can fight an enemy. It doesn't matter if enemy equals anything, because it's not in a state where it's going to do anything with that information. And so, instead of having to check every time we set state to see if we just built the turret within a certain amount of time, we just ignore that, because that code is never going to be triggered when it's being built. So going to state code rather than extraneous checks is one way that I really sped this up. You'll notice these states are just a lot smaller. This AI has been rewritten a number of times. And each time I've rewritten it, things have gotten a little more streamlined and a little more streamlined. I actually need to come through and do more commenting through here in this file. Oh yeah, that's one of the other things, just to point out. Before there was only one turret class, but what we're moving towards is having a base turret class and then having the TF2 turret being extended from that, and having a saw blade launching turret being extended from the same base turret. And so it handles a lot of these functions in a more generic way than Marco's original code. On the right, Marco's trace fire, and this traces a bullet out from the shooting point and determines if it hits the enemy. If it hits a Z, it deals damage to it. I've reworked it so it looks very different. I want to drill down on one specific line. I'm going to kind of highlight it by just creating a file here and do a little bit of this. And over on the right, I'm going to take the replacement line. What these lines both do is introduce spread to the bullets, so that some hit and some don't. And you can see that both of them use a vrand function of some kind to make that random. This 0.075 times accuracy mod times frand, what that does is it takes some inaccuracy value that Marco's put in and converts it into radians, and then multiplying it by some random value between 0 and 1 to kind of scale it by a random amount. Which is weird, because he's already taking the original direction and adding vrandom to it, which is a random vector. So a random direction vector. Right, which has an amplitude of 1. Okay, so he's taking the original direction, he's adding a random direction with an amplitude of 1, and scaling that amplitude 1 direction by the accuracy modifier, which you put in the code. If you go into the KF weapon source code, I believe it is, written by Tripwire, you'll find that they use this code instead. And the reason that it's really important that this one line of code is executed as quickly and efficiently as possible is because this is run every single time any bullet is fired on the server or the client. In the new one, we use vrand cone instead of a collection of things which add up to a direction. We just say return a random direction. And we feed it two variables. We feed it the normal of two vectors, and we feed it the accuracy mod, which is the same kind of thing. Accuracy mod here is a float, and so is this. And the aim target minus start location is actually the same as this direction right here. Right here it says direction is the normal of rep hit location minus. These are actually the same. This is the best way to represent this. This direction here is actually equal to the normal of rep hit location minus start. So we're doing some of the same things on both sides. And so we can cancel those things out if we're trying to determine which one of these will operate faster. And so if we take out this, and we take out this operation, so we're just passing it in some static value. We take out vfloat here, we take out vfloat here. Okay, we've taken out everything which occurs in both functions. Which one of these will execute faster? And the bottom line is that almost every single time, I believe, the left-hand one's going to execute faster, because this is a C++ function. Even if the normal function, which is a C++ function, runs faster than vrand cone, it should be faster to run this one C++ function on the left versus these three C++ functions on the right. And on the right, we have two mathematical operators, whereas we don't have those on the left. If we don't dig too far down, if we don't look at what the actual C++ code is in the engine which is being run, and we just take it for granted that C++ code will always be way faster than Unreal script, then we can see that there's a lot less going on in the code on the left than there is on the right. And this kind of minimization, these two lines on the right being turned into the one line on the left, is a great example of what I've done through every single line of this mod. And so I haven't finished benchmarking it. I believe I mentioned earlier that the benchmarking class is broken. I'll touch on that very quickly. But while the benchmarking hasn't been done, I'm hoping for and expecting a significant uplift in the performance of the mod overall. The benchmarking class. So the intention of this is to create a bunch of classes which test one specific thing in a very specific way. Think controlled environment. Each one of these functions is a controlled environment. This one's more for my curiosity, so that I can just have the best practices going forwards in my coding. But there are others, like the Tracefire benchmark, where I have that original version of Marco's code where he uses individual function calls, and then I have the Tripwire version here, which just uses vrand cone. I feed them very controlled variables, and I want to see how long does it take for it to run through this calculation 2,000 times versus running through this calculation 2,000 times. At this point, I'm planning on calling this new version of the mod Sentry Redux, because it really is a new remake of the mod from the ground up. It's a redo of the mod. It's a redux. But if people would like me to keep it the same as Marco's original mod name, I would be happy to do so. One way or another, there will be full creative credit given to Marco, Forrest Mark X, Commander Comrade Slav, and many others who have already helped with assets, with code, and with purely suggestions for the mod. When the mod has reached a level of stability and the number of features that matches Marco's original mod, I'm going to publish an open beta so that people can test out the features and make sure that I haven't introduced new bugs that weren't in the original mod. At this point in time, I have no idea when that's going to be. I've been trying to push out the beta for the last 2 months, and things just keep on getting in the way and getting stretched out. You've heard me mention both myself as the sole programmer in this project, and also a nebulous we. There's another person working with me, Rowdy Howdy, who's mostly been working on the upgrades themselves, what those upgrades are going to be, what kind of turrets will be in the game, and what kind of upgrades will be available for them. But while he's written some upgrades files, 90% of the code has been written by myself, and for most of the last year, it's been just myself working on the mod at any given point in time. I'm pretty committed to finishing this mod one way or the other, no matter how long it takes. It's been a labor of love. I really like this code, and I really like this game. So even if it takes me another year, I'd like to finish this. And if people suddenly volunteered to help me and I got this finished in the next couple weeks, I would be so happy to have this off my plate because it has taken way too long. Thank you.